that. And in chapter number 20, we're going to see the story of a man who tries to take that discontent and use it to his advantage. It's not uncommon when people are a little disappointed or they feel left out or people feel discontented, it always seems like there's somebody to come along and try to use that to stir the pot, right? To try to use that discontent as a weapon. And that's what's going to happen in our story tonight. We're going to talk chapter 20 about Sheba's rebellion. Okay? Sheba's rebellion. Number one, let's talk about the rebel. Number one, the rebel. It says in verse number 1 of chapter 20, there happened to be there a man of Belial, whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, we have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel. Sheba has a terrible attitude, right? He follows up the discontent from chapter number 19 and makes it loud, makes it obnoxious, blows a trumpet here, this one that's from the tribe of Benjamin. We don't have any part in David. Yep, that's kind of par for the course. That's how it's going to be from now on. We're not the tribe of Judah, so we don't have a part of David. We're not his favorite tribe. We're not going to be, his main focus. He doesn't care about us as much as he cares about Judah. He doesn't care about us as much as he does the southern region. We're so far removed from Jerusalem, we're probably going to be forgotten about forever. He says, we have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel. Why celebrate? Why celebrate the return of David? Just everybody go home. David doesn't care about everyone. It's just David and Judah, the descendants of Jesse. David only cares about family. We might as well just turn and go home because what part do we have here? Now, what is that? Again, that's a guy that's just trying to stir up trouble because he sees that everybody's kind of discontent. He sees that everybody's feeling kind of left out and a little sour about the way David's procession home, his return home, the party, the celebration. Some people feel left out. And he takes that and he tries to exploit it. He tries to get people to feel even worse, right? Where at the end of chapter 19, Judah was trying to calm everybody down. And that didn't work. So there was a heated exchange. And it says at the end there, the words of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. Sheba comes right along and says, see, this is just going to keep escalating, isn't it? Nobody cares. David doesn't care. We might as well just go home. So that's kind of the context of chapter 20. Verse 2 says, so every man of Israel went up from after David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah clave unto their king from Jordan even to Jerusalem. So Judah, that southern portion, that southern tribe, they clave to David. They showed their loyalty. And loyalty is best shown. Loyalty is best proved in conflict. And these men were going to be loyal to their king. Now there's a special note here in verse number 3 that David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 women, his concubines, whom he had left to keep the house, and put them in ward and fed them, but went not in unto them. So they were shut up to the day of their death, living in widowhood. David's made it back home to Jerusalem. He's gotten back to his palace. And we're reminded here that, remember when David left Jerusalem, when he was fleeing from Absalom, and he had left those concubines back home to tend to the house, to watch over everything that was there back at the palace? Well, Absalom took advantage of that situation, right? And he came in and he defiled those concubines. When David comes home and those concubines are still there, that's a tough situation, right? Because David, it's not like he can divorce them per se. They didn't do anything wrong. It's not like they can be punished. It's not like they committed, the wrong. Absalom is the one that did that. And yet he can't go back to them himself. They've been defiled by his son. It's just kind of a sad note, and it kind of interjects right here that these women they're living with consequences that they didn't create. They are suffering from the sins that other people have committed. Here you've got these women, now they're childless, and they've got to live in widowhood, basically. You say, but David's not dead, but they basically get to live like widows for the rest of their lives. That is a sad end to these women that now have to live out their days, like widows. And they have to suffer the consequences of other people's sins. Remember that, okay? Don't let that escape the back of your mind sometimes. When we get out of God's will, when we sin, when we're not faithful, sometimes people have to live with the consequences of that, and it's not just us, right? You might make decisions, you might get into things that start to impact other people. And now these women have to live with the consequences of Absalom's sin, which is a result of David's sin, and it's kind of just a sad note there. It's a reminder that the sins that went before had a long-lasting impact. The rebel. Now, number 2, let's talk about Amasa and Joab. Amasa and Joab. Verse number 4 says, Then said the king to Amasa, Assemble me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be thou here present. David wants to have an army assembled to address this rebellion, right? Doesn't want to wait, doesn't want it to linger. We got to do something about this now. So he sends Amasa to go get an army together and to be present here 3 days. Now you remember who Amasa was, right? And if you don't remember, he was the one that was actually the leader of Absalom's army. He's the one that Absalom had put in charge of his troops. And yet when that was squashed, when Absalom's army was defeated, David, in a show of good faith and in a show of reconciliation with those that had rebelled under Absalom, he actually took Amasa and was going to make him a general of his army. Okay, so that's why you see Amasa mentioned here and not Joab this time, because again, David, in a show of good faith, reconciliation, takes Amasa, puts him in charge of his army, orders him to go and get an army. You go and get the men of Judah and get back here within 3 days. We've got to do something about this rebellion from Sheba. He's starting to lead people astray. Now, verse number 5 says that so Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he tarried longer than the set time which he had appointed him. Now, I got to admit, Amasa is no Joab, right? He's not he's not up to the task. He's not up to the job like a guy like Joab would have been, right? Joab, a military man, fiercely loyal to David, ready to fight with Israel and for Israel at the drop of a hat. Amasa, kind of tarries, he kind of lingers, he delays. The 3 days pass, and he's not back. He's not there. That's going to bite him here in just a minute. So when he doesn't return, verse number 6 says that David said to Abishai, again, Joab's brother, those that had been faithful all along, Now shall Sheba, the son of Bichri, do us more harm than did Absalom. Take thou thy Lord's servants and pursue after him, lest he get him fenced cities and escape us. And there went out after him Joab's men and the Cherethites and the Pelethites and all the mighty men, and they went out of Jerusalem to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. When Amasa takes longer than the 3 days and he doesn't return, David turns to loyal Abishai and is like, okay, we can't wait around any longer. You got to take some men and we got to pursue after him, because if this thing keeps going on, if this thing is allowed to fester, it's going to make things worse, right? And that's kind of symbolic of what discontent is, right? The longer that you allow that kind of stuff to fester and people to stir pots and people to keep prodding people with unhappiness and things like that, it gets worse, right? If you don't address it, it often gets worse. And David realizes that. This actually has the potential to end up worse than the whole thing that Absalom started. If we don't address it, we got to do something about it. Now, it's already been 3 days, and I've sent for an army, and I don't know where Amasa is. So, Abishai, I need you to take thy Lord's servants. I I need you to get my men, and I need you to go and pursue and put an end to this rebellion. Okay? That's kind of what's going on there in verse 6 and verse 7. Now lo and behold, verse number 8, when they were at the great stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa went before them. Oh, Johnny come lately, right? He finally shows up, Amasa. Guess who that didn't sit well with? Joab, right? Joab, I'm not sure what's going on in the mind of Joab. It's probably one of two things. Commentators are kind of divided, but it probably falls in one of these two. Joab's probably either mad that he's been replaced. That's likely, potentially, right? Joab's either mad that he's not replaced, or that he's been replaced, or Joab's probably also pretty well ticked off that Amasa sleeping at the wheel. Like, David asked for an army. Where have you been? You failed. You had one job, right? And you were asked to go get an army. You didn't deliver. Whatever happened with Amasa, Joab, it didn't sit well with him. So verse number 8 tells us a little story here. Joab's garment that he had put on was girded unto him, and upon it a girdle with a sword fastened upon his loins and the sheath thereof. So you can imagine the garment that Joab was wearing. He's got a little sheath around the girdle, and he carries a sword, right? Joab's he's that kind of guy. But the sword, it says there in verse number 8, as he went forth, it fell out. Oops, right? Joab said to Amasa, Art thou in health, my brother? Joab took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him. Ah, sign of friendship, right? Hey, kind of grabbed him by the face, going to bring him in for a hug and a kiss him. Hey, how you doing, brother? Or art thou in health? How's it been, man? How you doing? But Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand. Oh, that sword that just fell out, that must have been an accident, right? Joab's just picking it up. He didn't pay any attention to it. If Joab has a sword in his hand, I'm not sure that I would trust him. Would you? Well, Amasa trusted him. And Amasa didn't think anything of that. It says he took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand, so he smote him therewith in the 5th rib, and shed out his bowels to the ground, and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued after Sheba, the son of Bichri. Joab picks up the sword, and while he's going to hug and pull Amasa in, give him the kiss, give him the sign of friendship, he takes that sword right through the ribs, and he kills him. Now, he kills him in the sense that, he's going to die from these wounds. He didn't exactly die that minute, right? You can stab someone, and even if their entrails or bowels start to gush out, they may not die right away. And it doesn't look like Amasa died right away. In verse number 11, it says that one of Joab's men stood by him and said, He that favoreth Joab, and he that is for David, let him go after Joab. And Amasa wallowed in the blood in the midst of the highway. When the man saw that all the people stood still, he removed Amasa out of the highway into the field and cast a cloth upon him. When he saw that everyone that came by him stood still. That is actually a practice that is still accomplished today, right? Someone's out in a public place and it's obvious that they are dead. They cover them up, right? There's something about people that we gawk, right? People gawk, people eyeball, people watch. And so there was a man there in verse number 11. One of Joab's men stood by him and said, He that favoreth Joab, and he that is for David, let him go after Joab. There was actually somebody that was intended to stand there by Amasa's body as he writhed in pain, as he's bleeding out and dying there. A man that is meant to stand there and basically point people as they come up to the Amasa, the leader of the army. Okay, that's it now. He's done. It's time to follow after Joab. You want to be loyal to David? It's time to be loyal to Joab. You want to follow? As the situation gets worse and as he wallows there, finally someone says, okay, this people are just stopping to gawk. People are just stopping to watch. We need to move him off the highway. And they do. They put him out in the field, put a cover over him. But the point is still the same at the end of the passage. It's time now Amasa is not general anymore. It's time to follow after Joab. Joab is now once again ready to assume control over David's army. Joab always leaves you wondering, what kind of guy is this? Is this a guy, and I mentioned again a couple of options, is this a guy that's just jealous and bitter that he was replaced, so he kills Amasa? Or is this a guy that's fiercely loyal to David and listen, Amasa, you messed up. You failed. You left David hanging when he asked for an army, and he's not going to tolerate any sense of disloyalty or weakness. You're almost left wondering with Joab, do I like this guy or do I not like this guy? I'm not sure with all the things that I'm reading about him thus far. I don't know. He's still apparently loyal to David. He that favoreth Joab and he that is for David, let him go after Joab. So David replacing Joab as captain of the army, that didn't last long. Joab took matters into his own hand. Now, number 3, let's talk about the revolt. Okay, the revolt. It says in verse number 13, and when he was removed out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. And he went through all the tribes of Israel into Abel and to Beth-maachah and all the Beerites, and they were gathered together and went also after him. So Joab begins this pursuit after Sheba, this one that had stirred up this little rebellion, this one that had played on everyone's discontent, this one that exploited everyone's unhappiness. Joab's ready to go after him, and he begins to pursue him all the way to this place of Abel. Now in verse number 15 it says that they came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maachah. And they cast up a bank against the city, and it stood in the trench. And all the people that were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. So Joab finds out where Sheba has holed up in this city of Abel of Beth-maachah, and he's going to besiege the city. And he's going to surround it, and he's going to start attacking the wall and try to take the wall down to go in there. We've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Siege warfare was a terrible occurrence in those days. This was common. Listen, there are no missiles, right? There's no bombs. That's not how war was fought back then. You would besiege a city. What does that mean? You surround them and you starve them out. You wait them out. They can't last in there forever. And you read what happens in the Bible when places were besieged, right? People inside the city, eventually they start turning on each other. In some of the worst cases, they result to cannibalism and infighting and just the weirdest. Besieging a city was no small matter, right? It was a terrible warfare that would be fought. Long, drawn out, often resulting in harsh consequences for innocent civilians, right, inside a city. And that's what's getting ready to happen here. Sheba and his band of rebels have holed themselves up in a city, and now an entire city is getting ready to face the consequences and the wrath of Joab. And if you haven't picked up on it yet, Joab's bad side is not generally the place that you want to be, especially if you want to survive. So in verse number 16, we see that there cried a wise woman out of the city. A wise woman in the city recognizes the situation and what's getting ready to happen, right? Joab is against us. Yeah, we're going to have to figure something out because this doesn't end well for anyone. Verse 16, then cried a wise woman out of the city, Hear, hear, say, I pray you unto Joab, come near hither that I may speak with thee. She wants a word with Joab. And when he was come near unto her, the woman said, Art thou Joab? And he answered, I am he. And then she said unto him, Hear the words of thy handmaid. And he answered, I do hear. Then she spake, saying, They were wont and to speak in old times, saying, They shall surely ask counsel at Abel. And so they ended the matter. This woman, when she finally gets an audience there with Joab, it used to be said, there was a proverb, or it used to be said that, you could ask of Abel, right? There was a time maybe when Abel was viewed as a place of wisdom, just kind of like, okay, hear me out, okay, right? Abel's historically known as a place of wisdom, so hear me out, listen to me, this woman's trying to implore him. Verse 19, I'm one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. She's not looking for trouble, and she's faithful. There's obviously a sense, there's a twofold sense, right? When you're talking about loyalty or faithfulness to God, and also the sense in which, in the context, we're talking about faithful to the king, faithful to David. Thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? And this is a wise woman, the Bible says. And her appeal to Joab is basically this. Are you really going to kill all of us just so that you can get at Sheba? Like, Joab is ready to tear down this wall and go in full force and wreak havoc on Abel. And this woman calmly wants to ask, are you going to destroy, verse number 19, a city and a mother in Israel? Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? Like, are you really? Are you that mad? Are you that upset? Are you really going to destroy an entire city? Are you going to destroy families? Are you going to kill all of us and swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? Your brethren, your family in Israel, are you going to do that? This is a good question, right? Joab can be a hothead. And right now, Sheba's on his bad side. And there's no telling what he will do. So she's kind of like, okay, he's peaceable, right? Faithful. Listen, you don't have any trouble with us. Why are you going to kill us all when it's really just Sheba that he wants, right? Now, Joab's a practical man. Verse 20, Then Joab answered and said, Far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. The matter is not so. But a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba the son of Bichri by name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. Joab's answer is, no, listen, I'm not here to destroy you. I'm not here to destroy the entire city, but you all are housing the enemy. You all are housing a rebel. Sheba turned against David. He's led a rebellion against him. I am here for him, and I'm going to get him one way or another. But, according to verse number 21, deliver him only, you give him to me, and I'll depart from the city. How about that? Is that a deal? I won't destroy your city if you send out Sheba. If you send Sheba out to me, I'll leave you alone. This is a wise woman, right? What is her answer in verse 21? Behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall. And then the woman went unto all the people in her wisdom. And they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. He blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, every man to his tent. And Joab returned to Jerusalem unto the king. It's interesting that it says that she went out in her wisdom. Like, this woman is able to go out to the city, and there are obviously a couple of different kinds of people, right? There's innocent people in there. They didn't have anything to do with this rebellion. They're just, that's their city, and that's where Sheba was holed up at the time. There's obviously a handful of people that were there with Sheba in his rebellion. And yet this woman in her wisdom starts to kind of make the rounds around the city, and you can understand by the time it's done, she's convinced enough people that, you know what, we all going to die. This does not end well for any of us. We can either kill him or we can all die. And obviously the decision is made according to these verses. They cut off the head of Sheba and cast it out to Joab And Joab then retires from the city. The rebellion was instantly and quickly squashed. You know what? When you start to put things in perspective, all of a sudden the little discontent from earlier in the chapter, all of a sudden that's not there anymore. Or at least it's not worth fighting over, is it? Now, Sheba's not alone in that city, but you know what? When this woman goes forth in her wisdom, she's able to talk to people, reason with people. You know what? Now all of a sudden, there's nobody willing to fight with Sheba. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, let's kill Sheba, cut his head off, send it out, and it'd be over. What happened to everyone's discontent? You know, that's now a small thing in the light of when you have to ask this question, am I going to fight against Joab? Am I going to go to war against Joab just because I got my feelings hurt? Am I going to go to war against the army of Israel because I felt slighted and I felt cheated and I got in a bad mood because I felt like the tribe of Judah left me out? You see, a lot of times when we feel cheated or when we feel down or depressed or discouraged or we feel like someone didn't notice us or we feel like we've been left out, you know, we let that stuff fester and we let that stuff linger. You know, sometimes a healthy dose of perspective, like, is needed. Okay, you feel cheated, you feel slighted, you feel unhappy or discontent because of the way things happened. Are you willing to fight over it? How big a deal is it really? Like, is it big enough that you're going to go to war with Joab? I mean, are you really that much against David? Or did someone come along and just stir you up when you were upset and when you were bitter? And now all of a sudden it's actually time to do something about it and you realize, yeah, this wasn't worth it. Listen, those things happen to people. People work that way. There are times that we get upset or we get our feelings hurt, and you know what? We let people prod us, and we let that stuff fester, and we let that stuff linger. You know what? If we were honest, this isn't really worth fighting about. It's really not worth being that upset about, because I'm certainly not going to take on the army of Israel for it. I'm certainly not going to fight against Joab and the armies. A real healthy perspective is needed. Like, okay, I'm upset. How far am I going to take this? Can you be honest? When you get upset, next time you get your feelings hurt, ask yourself that question. Am I going to take this all the way to the end? Like, are these people really going to fight to the death against Joab? Because they got their feelings hurt. And the answer is no. When this woman goes out in her wisdom and speaks to all these men, you know what? Cut the head off of Sheba and be done with it. And it's done. And it's instantly squashed and the rebellion is over. And these men were not willing to fight against the army of Israel. What happened at the beginning of this chapter, Sheba was able to go around, and I say again, play upon people's emotions, play upon people's discontent, rile a bunch of people up, and we don't have any inheritance in David, and David doesn't care about us, and you know, everybody got their feelings hurt. But at the end, it wasn't something worth fighting for. It wasn't something worth jeoparding their lives for. It wasn't something that they were willing to take to an obnoxious end. Find your limits, right? Learn how to decipher what is true. What's true what's discontent, what's unhappy, what's hurt feelings, what's feeling cheated, versus a real conviction of wrongdoing and what you're willing to stand for, no matter what comes, right? Righteous indignation. That's not what these people have. These people got mad. These people got their feelings hurt. And they had to learn the hard way and the long way that they got upset over something that they weren't really worth, it wasn't going to pursue. It wasn't really worth fighting about. You know, we often mention those verses when in the book of Matthew, where it talks about if you get offended or if your brother offends you, go to him, right? And if it's that big a deal that it's going to fester in you and you're not going to be able to, you know, love covers a multitude of sins, right? But if you've been so offended and you've been so hurt that you can't pass over it, okay, understood, those things happen. If you've been so offended, well, then go to him. And if it's been such a big deal that you feel it needs to be addressed and you've gone to him and it hasn't been addressed yet, then take someone else from the church and maybe take, you know, 2 or 3 more, okay? Those are the steps to do that. If you're not willing to go through those steps, then maybe the discontent that you're feeling just probably ought to stop there, right? Maybe if you're not willing to go through those steps, then love needs to cover the multitude of sins. These men are not willing to go to the end for Sheba. They probably shouldn't have started. But let that be a lesson for us, right? Am I going to take this all the way to the end? Because if not, these men put themselves in harm's way and ended up held up in a city with Sheba. And if it wasn't for a wise woman going around and spreading her wisdom and talking sense into folks, Joab's on the other side of that wall, and he's starting to knock. And these men were dangerously close to getting in a whole lot of trouble because they let somebody stir them up in a moment of anger, in a moment of discontent. Don't let somebody do that to you, okay? If you're unhappy, if you're discontent, get over it or decide if you're willing to take whatever the steps are that come next. These men weren't willing to do that, right? And so you have a lot of people that almost got in a whole lot of trouble because they let somebody else stir them up. Don't let somebody else stir you up, okay? If you're unhappy, the person that you don't want to be around is somebody else who's unhappy because you guys are just going to play off each other. You're going to stir it up in each other. If you're unhappy, try to find somebody that is happy. Try to find someone that can talk some sense into you. That thankfully, and we don't even know her name here in this passage, but there is a wise woman that talks some sense into people. Like, listen, is it worth it? Are we really going to stand here and fight against this? No. If we send out Sheba, can it be over? Joab says, yeah, it can be over today. You'll have his head. Because it wasn't worth it, right? Ask yourself the question, is it worth it? These men found out it wasn't, right? So just consider that, right? Practical lessons in these. There's things here, we know we're talking about these historical things. We're not into like strictly doctrinal portions of Scripture, but they are immensely practical. They're extremely helpful as you look at people and their attitudes and the way minds and people work. Ask yourself that question, right? Is it worth it? Am I really going to take this thing all the way to the end? I pray that be a help to us. The last few verses of chapter 20 just deal with the new administration, right? The rebellion is over. Sheba's been killed. So the last few verses just talk about David's next administration, right? Just like a king, we talked about it with his first entry into Jerusalem, and he set up his kingdom. Verses 23 through verse 25 talk about David's administration and the people that were set up in charge of different jobs, all right? All right, we will get into chapter 21 next time.